Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. I'm joined by Brian Henry, Eric Pond, Pete Mohan, and Pete Worth. And gentlemen, after 3 years, 11 months, 17 days, this Friday, March 17th, Marquette is back in the NCAA Tournament, facing off against the South Carolina University Gamecocks in Greenville, South Carolina. Fellas, it feels good. It feels good to be back.
It's a celebration!
Put your dancing shoes on.
Everybody put your dancing shoes on. We have 4 or 5 days of anticipation here before we tip off on Friday. There's nothing quite like that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday leading into the NCAA tournament before your team tips off. And we'll have to wait to see. They don't announce the starting times till a little later. But Marquette's dancing, baby. Can't wait to see that game against the University of South Carolina with a potential, don't want to jump too far ahead, the potential to face off against the Dukies in round 2.
For all the Catholic school kids out there, rejoice and be glad. Thank God. 3 years was far too long. It is exciting to have this team back in the NCAA tournament. I don't care what seed they are. This was the goal at the start of the season. They got here. Thank God.
We have to give Wojo his due. I mean, he's right on schedule. He turned this team around. The first year he was here, it was rough. The cupboard was bare. He started bringing his guys. And this year, with the combination of the transfer talent in Reinhardt and Rousey, and originally Fisher was a transfer as well, that paired with his freshmen who came in and shot the ball well in Howard and in Hauser. I mean, this team is night and day different from last year's team, and they certainly earned the right to be in the tournament this year with their exceptional offense. And that's really what this matchup is going to come down to, is a great offense against a great defense. We're the 7th-ranked offense on KenPom, and they're the 3rd-ranked defense. So this is going to be a pretty interesting showdown.
We're going to get into all the good stuff and the nitty-gritty of the South Carolina game in just a little bit. But before we do that, we wanted to rejoice a little bit by the fact that we're in the tournament. But we also wanted to give a shout-out to the Big East for getting 70% of its teams in to the NCAA tournament. We've got, help me out here, fellas, we've got Butler, Creighton, Seton Hall, Xavier, Providence, Marquette, and
a team called Villanova was pretty good.
Yeah, big number 1 Villanova.
Big number 1 Villanova.
I don't know if you heard of them.
I have heard of them.
Number 1 overall seed Villanova.
They won a few games in this tournament last year.
I heard they lost a game this year.
Oh, they got smoked by Marquette earlier this year, though.
What do you guys think it says about Marquette that we have the record that we did in conference, and we got 70% of the teams from our conference into the NCAA tournament? I think it speaks incredibly highly, not only to the caliber of schedule that we've played, but the quality of team that we have, that we've been able to do that, not only with our poor defense, but put together such a stellar offense.
I think it's a pleasant surprise for this league. If you go back to our preseason pod, the very first one that we did, not complete consensus, but the thought primarily was that this was an at best 6-team league, likely a 5-team league into the NCAA tournament. To get 7, while there are plenty of low seeds, is an incredible accomplishment. Marquette, Seton Hall, and Providence all able to claw their way in. What more can you say?
And it was put into position by a great non-conference run.
Absolutely. By
a lot of the teams in the Big East. Butler and Villanova leading the way. I think they both came into conference play undefeated, or maybe with Butler with 1 loss coming in.
And Pete, Marquette needed all of its big non-conference wins. Vanderbilt turned into an NCAA tournament team. Georgia missed, but it was still a road team against, I think Georgia finished 52nd in the RPI.
Fresno State made it to the semifinals of their tournament as well.
They needed every win that they got to get the 10 seed that we saw unveiled on the television.
And thankfully, we're not in the same position that Providence is, and that's playing in Dayton.
Exactly right.
Right. Well, we can't forget about the two major injuries in the conference, too, to Xavier's Sumner and Creighton's Watson, because that really significantly increased the parity in the league and allowed all of the kind of middle teams like us, Seton Hall, and Providence to really be more competitive in those games and to steal a few from those two teams when we may not have with those two teams playing at their best like they were early in the season.
Yeah, we had the advantage of playing all four of those games against Creighton and Xavier without those players. So that certainly had a positive impact on our record.
Right.
Can you believe, going back to the preseason coaches poll, that we finished 5-1 against the preseason top 3 teams in the conference? Injuries obviously were a huge part of it, but still, they finished 5-1 against those top 3 teams and still barely made it in. Obviously, it shows how flawed we were with some tough losses against St. John's and Georgetown. But that's a pretty solid feat when you think back to all that we said about those 3 at the start of the season. To go 5-1 says something.
Well, I think that bodes well for our tournament chances if we show that we can knock off teams that are better than most. This first game against South Carolina will probably be something similar to, a Seton Hall type of matchup, a kind of grind them out type game. And we have struggled a little bit in those. I think that we're a more talented team than them, and a matchup with Duke would put us in a situation that we have faced in facing a top-notch team like Villanova, and we've been capable of pulling off that win. So I wouldn't necessarily cap our potential moving forward in this tournament at just one game.
So Mohan provided the perfect segue there, getting into deeper analysis of South Carolina. Just a reminder, Marquette will play South Carolina on Friday. We don't have the time yet as of recording. Further down the bracket, it is Duke playing against Troy. So Marquette will play, the winner of Marquette, South Carolina will play the winner of Duke, Troy, very likely Duke. The committee obviously had intentions there of hoping to pin Wojo up against his mentor, Coach K. But looking over the South Carolina team, looking over their roster, looking over their strengths, their weaknesses, Mohan, you said at the top, they're clearly a defensive-minded team, quite abysmal on the offensive side of the ball. But looking at their roster, we match up with them pretty well in terms of height and size. That was my first fear. You think of one of these SEC teams that they're going to be able to throw a bunch of 6'8", 6'9" guys at you. That's not the case at all. We match up with them really well height and size-wise, particularly the 3 and 4 spots, which is where they get a majority of their production from.
These kinds of teams make me nervous, and we just got done talking about how we beat Xavier, we beat Creighton twice. Those two are more offensive-minded teams. I am a little bit hesitant, just skeptical of our chances on this game. It makes me really nervous going up against these kind of defensive-oriented teams that can really just swarm you with their length and athleticism. I know you, Mike, you're talking about the height we match up pretty well against, but with a team as athletic as as South Carolina is now, I don't know that for sure. I got to look at the team, or I got to look at I got to do a little more research on the Gamecocks.
They are ranked 4th in the nation in forcing turnovers.
Right.
So
right. With that, then you have to assume that means they got some pretty long athletes, and just those kind of grinded out kind of games that Pete, that you talked about that we struggled against. I think this is going to be one of those games, and I'm a little nervous about it.
Marquette and South Carolina shared some common opponents this year. Both teams faced off against Michigan, against Seton Hall, against Georgia, and Vanderbilt. South Carolina got one over Michigan, 61-46. They lost a close game to Seton Hall. South Carolina beat Georgia by just a handful of buckets, and they lost to Vanderbilt coming down the end stretch of the season. Actually, South Carolina closed the season with a 3-5 stretch, losing in the first round of the SEC tournament to Alabama, a real clunker of a game where they only put up 53 points. So speaking to the fact that their offense is lacking, but I'll tell you what, fellas, we know Marquette, we know the ceiling for this offense. We've seen it at a few games this year. I think we also know the ceiling for this defense. Our defense I can't believe I'm going to say this, but our defense is what it is. It's not going to get any better.
Attaboy. Knew I'd break you.
The thing that scares me is that South Carolina has a solid defense. If they can get shots to fall, now they haven't done that this year. They are abysmal from the three-point line. They're a little bit better from the field generally. Terrible for
315th in the nation in effective field goal percentage. So
yeah,
if that tells you anything.
So we think we know their offense, but our defense, so Auburn is a good proxy in the SEC for caliber of defense that Marquette has. We're about the same as Auburn. South Carolina was able to put up 98 points on Auburn's defense. So you can't, that's apples and oranges. But when South Carolina played against a similar defense to Marquette's, they put up almost 100 points.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 315th ranked effective field goal percentage. They're also 45th in the country in offensive rebound percentage, which we talked about all year is a major, major crutch for Marquette. And so that's another thing to be very, very concerned about regarding the old Cox of game.
So, Eric, I want to bring you in. I want to ask you something. So, one of the things that we look for at this time of the year is experience. I did some quick calculations looking over the Marquette roster. Juwan Johnson obviously has never been to the NCAA tournament. Luke Fisher has never been to the NCAA tournament. Andrew Rousey has never been. Caton Reinhardt has been twice. He played for UNLV one year. He logged 26 minutes. And for USC last year, he logged 31 minutes. So we have a total of 57 minutes of experience in one person in the NCAA tournament. What do you think that means for this team? Do you think our freshmen, they've done it all year, do you think they can continue to deliver on a bigger stage than they've ever been on?
Yeah, I think, first off, congratulations to the seniors on the team, Juwan, Luke, and, just everyone else on the team who's sort of stuck through some of these tough years. I think this team is really built on young shooting talent and talent below sort of that senior level, and that's what we've had to rely on all year. I think we don't deviate from that. I think that also means being more of that sharp shooting squad. Perhaps experience is a little bit less important. You want to say that this year, having Caton be the only experienced NCAA tournament level player on the team, perhaps it doesn't make the biggest difference. Rousey, Howard, even Hauser, and Reinhardt himself as a shooter, I think that'll help overcome some of the gap in experience that we are going to face in the throughout the tournament.
I think one thing that I'm really looking forward to seeing in this game is the fact that South Carolina is so good at forcing turnovers, and there's been times where Marquette's been a little bit loose with the ball. We're going to rely heavily on Howard and Rousey to bring the ball up. Obviously, we can only speculate as to what our starting lineup will be. Maybe we'll get to that later on in this podcast. But at least to start, I'm guessing that Rousey and Howard will be out there together. And if this team, South Carolina, is devoted to hounding these guards above the three-point line, it's really going to come down to our big men's performance. And we may have to rely heavily upon Luke to contribute to our offense in this game if we want.
Don't discount the slashers as well, Pete. The bigs will need to do it, but Juwan and Hanif will have to do it as well, too, if they're that aggressive.
I don't know about Hanif. He looks...
Well, I'm saying he and Juwan are our two best slashers. Whether Hanif gets off the bench remains to be seen. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Pete, but I think that'll be a big part of it, too.
No, that's true. I mean, I think for me, their role has to be making themselves available to those guards in order to offload that ball and get them into the flow of the offense. Because if those guys are hanging out in the corners or just sort of, they're not moving off the ball as much as they should, that's when our guards are in the most trouble. So if those guys are active at getting open throughout the game, Luke's going to get one-on-one opportunities to score at the basket as well. And I think that attacking the rim is what we're going to need to do to get open looks for our guards out there, because they're going to be pressured aggressively because of their lack of height.
To simplify it, I think it's this. Marquette has the bigs to hang with NCAA tournament teams. We have the guards to hang with NCAA tournament teams. And we have the shooting that can win and demoralize NCAA tournament caliber teams. The recipe is here. They have the roster that is very capable of beating a team like South Carolina. And as we've seen what they did against Villanova earlier this year, they could possibly hang with a team the caliber of Duke. they're in a spot. Look, I don't think anybody here on this podcast is going to start by saying, oh, yeah, they're going to the Final Four. But this roster is fairly balanced. It struggles defensively, but it can shoot, and it defends at a solid rate. If they can put the ball in the basket well enough, they're going to give themselves a chance to win. If I was South Carolina...
But does it rebound?
Well, probably not. Well, against Seton Hall, it definitely doesn't. Against others, it has. I think it's going to... If I'm South Carolina, I hate this matchup.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is a nightmare to get ready to play Marquette on this short of notice. And we've alluded to that on previous podcasts, that getting to the NCAA tournament is going to be a huge plus. They're not an easy team to get ready for. A lot of guys can hurt you.
You know, the one thing that scares me is when think back to the Seton Hall game that we all just went through. We didn't even want to record a pod because that was such a shit show. Seton Hall played to a level of defense that was smothering. We were able to get shots off, but not like we're used to. I think we can expect a lot of the same from this Georgia team. So, you know, we went into that Seton Hall game.
South Carolina.
South Carolina. South Carolina. So we went into that Seton Hall game thinking that, yes, they can play defense, but Marquette, we've just got too many shooters that they can't, they won't be able to lock us down. I think we can fall into that same trap pretty easily with South Carolina where, neighbor, you mentioned the length that they have. Yeah, maybe the height's not there for them, but I think we've seen the example, and I bet you South Carolina is going to spend some time looking at that Seton Hall game of figuring out how to shut us down, figuring out how to run Marcus Howard down and really slow him down in the backcourt.
Well, another X factor for us, is if Juwan Johnson's playing well, if he's playing engaged, if he's playing under control, and if he's hitting some shots from the outside. Because if he's hitting, and all of our other guys are feeling it as well, that's when we are extremely dangerous. When we only have like Rousey or Howard, Hauser, Reinhardt, a lot of these guys are shooters. They're not on every game. But if Juwan Johnson is engaged, he can hit some of those shots, and he's also active on the defensive end and can get some easy transition buckets. That is going to be huge for us. He is our one big-time D1 athlete, and I've said it throughout the year. When he is playing his best, Marquette is at its best.
That's an excellent point. And looking at the roster, Juwan's been getting, obviously, the majority of minutes at the 3 spot, and that he matches up. He's about an inch taller than Sindarius Thornwell, who logs the majority of possessions for South Carolina. So I think Juwan's going to be put in a position where he's going to have to play some defense. We'll obviously switch people on and off Sindarius, but Juwan's going to have to play defense. So I think exactly as you said, the extent to which that takes away from some of his offense or adds to it is going to be a big storyline in this game.
For me, one stat that really stands out to me, actually, and this could hold the key to Marquette's success in the game. Marquette always, has hinged on their shooting throughout the season. But one normalizing factor is if you can get to the line and make free throws, then the amount of shots in the field that you have to make in order to win decreases. So South Carolina's defense gives up an insane number. They're 338th in the country in the amount of free throws allowed, basically. So
yeah, it's insane.
If Marquette is able to get to the line and take advantage of their number 7 in the country free throw percentage, the advantage is there because Marquette is going to hit shots. They're just too good of shooters to, not hit at least 5 threes in a game, etc. And if they're getting to the line 20 times a game and hitting 16, 17, 18 of those, then South Carolina really has no chance.
Mike, you mentioned Sindarius Thornwell. He's the SEC Player of the Year. I really want to kind of look up some games of his just to kind of see him in action.
Right.
But just knowing that they have a player of his caliber knows that this is not going to be an easy game, and I think it'll be a really close matchup. Just knowing that they have NBA talent on the squad should be voice for concern. I'm very concerned about this game. Is basically the main theme here of what I'm talking about.
While we're recording this, Ken Pom came out with his prediction, and it's a 51% in favor of Marquette, 49% South Carolina. So Ken Pom's thinking it's going to be a close game. Eric?
Yeah, I think we're probably going to see over the next couple days in all the sort of bracketology and analysis and from a lot of the talking heads that this will likely be a popular upset pick. I just want to reiterate what Neighbor was saying, and this is pretty simple top-level analysis, but shutting down Thornwell is our number one concern going into this game. He accounted for 30.2% of South Carolina's scoring in SEC games. He had career-high 34 points against Kentucky, so he shows up big in big games, and then had a 44.21 rebound performance in a 4 overtime contest against Alabama on February 7th. So obviously those numbers inflated a little bit.
Sounds like Matt Held.
Yeah, it sounds just like Matt Held. But this guy can score. He also is a well-rounded player. He led the team in scoring 17 times this year, but also led them in rebounding 11 times and assists 11 times and steals 16 times. So this guy is a production machine.
So just take out his knees.
He's basically Russell Westbrook.
His PER must be just insane if you calculate it out, for his year here. At the same time, he's a first-team All-SEC player. We beat 2 teams with 3 first-team All-SEC players this year in Georgia and Vanderbilt with J.J. Frazier, Yonte Mayton, and Luke Cornett.
So, Brian Henry, I want to throw this question to you because I'm wondering kind of where the rub is and where the truth is between this. When you look at the turnover rate, it's been mentioned before, I think, Pete Mohan, you mentioned it. The rate at which South Carolina is able to turn their opponents over is high. We've seen Seton Hall do it. We've seen other teams in the Big East do it. Press Marcus, press Rousey, and they're prone to coughing the ball up. Do you think there's an answer coaching-wise to help put Marcus and Rousey in better positions, or do you think the answer is having Caton bring the ball up more if the situation calls for it?
I think personally, after what I watched this season for 30-plus games, I'd say the latter. They struggled against full-court pressure for long stretches this year. Now, it is interesting to note that Seton Hall, in that last game in the Big East tournament where they took it to us, they didn't throw as much full-court pressure on. They did a lot of half-court trapping, but not as much full. So they backed off a little bit, whether that was respect for the guards or they just wanted to change the look that they showed. If I'm South Carolina and their coaches are going through scouting, they are going to put pressure on them. I think we do see Caton bringing up a little bit, but if I had to guess, I think Wojo's going to still leave the ball in the hands of Rousey and Howard for most of the game. He didn't make any massive adjustments when Seton Hall threw their pressure on in the last Big East game. So I think those are the guys that brought us here. That's who Wojo's going to leave on the court and have go up against it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Rousey has shown himself to be capable at handling pressure. None of us really knew at the beginning of the season just how good of a ball handler he was. And yeah, he's had his turnovers, but he's capable of handling the rock, and especially going to the basket. I think we've all been impressed by his ability to score in different ways just besides the three-point line. So I'm confident in his ability to bring the ball up. Marcus Howard, as a freshman, going to be his first NCAA tournament. I'm a little more nervous about him. But overall, in terms of
he's got a gold medal.
Yeah, he's only 17, so that might rattle him a little bit.
No longer.
He's 17 still.
He'll be 17 for his entire career.
Overall, in terms of handling pressure and protecting the ball, I'm pretty happy with this team. The offensive rebounding that we allow and our lack of size contributes to our porous defense, and that's our biggest Achilles heel.
Mike, you asked me about senior leadership and the dynamic on this team earlier, and I talked about how us shooting the ball at a sort of a historic rate for the Marquette team sort of negates some of those concerns. It's interesting just to look at South Carolina and how they're constructed to put against sort of our dynamic and handling that pressure. It's a team with only 3 seniors, so again, not necessarily laden with senior talent or NCAA tournament level experience. But again, one of those players is Sindarius Thornwell, so they really probably do have a strong, experienced vocal senior leader. They're going to be able to perhaps handle the pressure in a little bit different way than what we're going to show.
So another thing that when you're looking at South Carolina and you're kind of measuring them up and trying to figure out what they're good at doing on defense, one of the things that pops at you is they're very, very good at defending the 3-point line. But if you dig a little bit deeper and look at how the SEC as overall as a conference shoots the three-point ball.
Mike, can I interrupt you just for 1 second? When you say the name of the conference, you have to chant it in three-letter increments. Just that's the only way those people understand.
And you know why that is? Because it just means more, right?
Except they won't even be watching any of the NCAA tournament outside of Kentucky.
No, they will not.
That's very true. Very true. So, point being is that South Carolina defends the three-point ball very well, but the SEC conference shoots the three-point ball. They are the 7th worst three-point shooting conference in the country out of several dozen conferences. So the SEC is abysmal at three-point shooting, so I tend to not take as much stock in the fact that they can defend the three-point line that well. Hopefully, and we'll have to see how the game plays out, but hopefully Marquette will be able to get off plenty of three-point shots, something that we weren't able to do at a high enough clip most recently against Seton Hall.
Well, let's just say that South Carolina has not seen a shooting team like Marquette all year. I mean, Marquette is possibly the best shooting team in the country, maybe up there with UCLA and a couple other teams, but even Kentucky, when South Carolina faced Kentucky is 61st in the country in effective field goal percentage and only shoots three-pointers at 35.3 while we shoot 43%. So we're going to be a shocking experience for this South Carolina defense. I know that they're good, and they're obviously active with their hands, and they're an aggressive defense as noted by their foul percentage and their ability to prevent three-point shooting. But look, this Marquette team has unlimited range. They have at least 5 guys that could go off at any time, and this is going to be an adjustment for South Carolina. I think that Marquette comes out in this game and takes a little bit of a lead early because South Carolina just isn't used to the type of firepower on this Marquette offense.
So before we wrap it up here, I don't think we're going to do final predictions today just because I think we need a little bit more time to ruminate. But I want to get your take on all of your take on one more thing. Columbia, South Carolina, where South Carolina, the University of South Carolina is about an hour.
Famously hot
is about an hour and a half drive from Greenville, South Carolina, where this game will be played. Is there any fear that South Carolina fans are going to show up in enough number to make this an overwhelming home court game for this matchup coming up on Friday?
Mike, I think we've established that South Carolina fans are just learning that they have a men's basketball team this week. So
that's true.
I think that site is going to be overwhelmed with Duke fans. Yeah, South Carolina fans, it's a big state school. They'll have a good chunk of people there. It's going to be a road game for Marquette, but I don't think that's a fan base that I'm necessarily afraid of.
And, don't discount the fact that it's our first tournament in almost 4 calendar years. So we'll probably have a decent showing there, right?
Pete Mohan's already loading up the Winnebago to drive up there.
I am.
Maybe we're overlooking this. South Carolina's first NCAA tournament appearance since 2004.
Wow.
So maybe their fans come out in bigger numbers than we think. I don't know. I have no idea.
The most important factor here to look at is the fact that we're also in the same session as Duke. So there's going to be a hell of a lot of Duke fans in Greenville. I mean,
and probably cheering for Wojo.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's going to be more Duke fans willing to shell out money than, South Carolina fans. I don't know if they can get out of their jobs at Bojangles to get to the game. So,
jeez.
Shots fired.
Can I take a moment just to
pontificate?
Fireside chats with Brian Henry.
Can I take a moment just to let the air out of South Carolina's balloon for a moment? Congratulations on making the NCAA Tournament, Gamecocks, for the first time, as Mike said, since 2004. This is a program that has 5 NCAA tournament berths since 1973. They haven't won a frigging tournament game since 1973. So just a nice nudge to Wojo and the boys. Let's not give them their first win in 500 fucking years. Good Lord, this is not a program that historically has any success on this stage, and I don't see any reason why they need to start having success.
And Frank Martin, their coach, has not had an NCAA tournament win since 2011, 2012 with Kansas State. Only known for his angry scowl.
And Michael Beasley.
And recruiting Michael Beasley. Those are the only 2 things he's known for. So
isn't he buddies with Buzz, too?
Buzz.
That is his third thing that everybody knows him for.
Few quick thoughts here on the matchup and just the pre sort of announcement bracketology. It looks like by my quick study that at least 2 outlets got this matchup right. But interestingly, they actually had the seeding reversed, with Marquette being the better seed. One was Fox Sports. Stuart Mandel had South Carolina in the Midwest as a 9 seed, playing Marquette as an 8 seed in Tulsa. USA Today's Shelby Mast had the Gamecocks in the West region as a 9 seed, facing off against Marquette as an 8 seed.
As long as they don't fill up on boiled peanuts, they should be there cheering.
All right, fellas, I want to throw it to each of you for final thoughts, if you have them, before we sign off today. I think there could be another pod or two up our sleeves for the remainder of this week, since we do have a long week until Marquette plays on Friday. Whoever has a first final thought, throw it out there. It doesn't have to be eloquent.
At the start of the season, we all assessed that the best case scenario for this team was making the NCAA tournament, and they have achieved that. It was a wild year of ups and downs. There were some incredible wins, some incredibly disappointing losses, but ultimately it has landed in the NCAA tournament. If I'm grading it out, I think they've reached an A, because this is what they're supposed to do. And a win in the first round gives it an A+. Anything after that just continues to add to it. This was the hope. I don't think everybody thought this roster was a lock to get here, but they did. The coaching staff and the players deserve to be commended, and I'll echo what Eric said earlier. Congratulations to the 2 seniors that have been here their entire careers. I know Luke missed the first half of a season, but Luke and Juwan, well done. Congrats on making the NCAA tournament.
And Matt Velasquez reporting that Juwan was getting a little emotional after the announcement, so good for Juwan.
Attaboy.
Yeah, good for those guys.
Yeah, you got to feel so happy for them. And we're here now approaching almost to the date, the 30 anniversary of Wojo's hiring to the program. This has just been, I think, an incredible season, an incredible outcome to the season, and exactly what we had hoped to see. Best case scenario, Brian, as you just laid out. I think, I couldn't agree more. This is already a successful campaign for this team. It's hugely promising for the future with Wojo and with Marquette basketball. Also, I think, we should give a nod to Bill Scholl. He took over when our previous athletic director, Larry Williams, resigned, and he's part of this new tenure and this new sort of structure as well, and deserves likely some of that credit. But again,
Attaboy, Scholey.
Just hugely proud to be a Marquette Golden Eagle or Warrior, whatever you want to call it today, and really happy.
Hilltopper.
Hilltopper. Really happy for Juwan, Luke.
I'm partial to the golden apple.
And the rest of the school. we are Wojo's Warriors.
The gold.
Here, so.
We are the gold.
Pete Worth, any final thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. We made the NCAA tournament, which is great, but we also got there by playing an exciting brand of basketball.
Amen.
Which we haven't had in at least 4 years. Buzz's last season and the first 2 Wojo seasons were brutal to watch. And the way that we can light up the scoreboard this year has been awesome to watch. I mean, we haven't had a team like this in the 10, 12 years that we've been watching the team, watching this program. And so, yeah, the wait that we had to endure to get back was a little rough. But this season...
Would you go so far to say it's the hardest part, neighbor?
It was Mr. Petty. It was Mr. Petty. But yeah, I mean, when you're playing... South Carolina fans probably can't say this, but every game was must watch, and it was fun to watch. And when we were really rolling, it was beautiful basketball, and that's what I really enjoyed from this season.
Pete Mohan, any final thoughts before we sign off?
Not to be all Nancyan on you, but hello, friends. In the Highlands of South Carolina, a city known affectionately and facetiously as G Vegas, threes are wild this Friday afternoon as Marquette takes on South Carolina in the Gamecocks' first appearance in the NCAA tournament in 13 years. Can super freshman Marcus Howard lead this Marquette Golden Eagles team to a second-round matchup against Coach Wojo's first mentor, Coach K? These are the storylines and more that we face in Greenville, South Carolina this Friday as Marquette faces off against the South Carolina Gamecocks.
Let's send it to Gary Parrish and Charles Barkley in the studio.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here at the Real Chili Podcast. Thanks so much for listening to this episode, the preview episode for the NCAA Tournament. Marquette is finally back and will be there, as we've said a million times, this Friday. Time to be announced soon, and we'll be sure to tweet that out from our account. I'm Mike Lavender signing off for Pete Mohan, Pete Worth, Eric Pond, and Brian Henry. This is going to be a fun ride, fellas. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon. Talk to you next time here on the Real Chili Podcast.
In the event that Marquette wins the national championship, I already know what Nance's canned line would be. And the Eagles are golden! No doubt. Nance already has that written down. He wrote one down for all 68 teams.